Today on Mr. Watson's Map World, we're going to be exploring the countries and capitals of South America. We've already explored the states and capitals of the United States and the countries and capitals of North America. Now we're going to focus on the countries and capitals of the neighbors to the south in South America. So, starting in the north, I just want to point out that French Guiana is not a country independent, it belongs to France, but the capital is Cayenne. But it is part of France officially and not an independent nation. To the west, we have the small nation of Suriname and its capital of Paramaribo on the Suriname River. The vast majority of Suriname is dense rainforest. To the west, we have Guyana, and Guyana and Suriname are unique because Suriname, we have Dutch ancestry and the Dutch language mixture. Also, French Guiana, obviously French, and Guyana has a history of English language. And the capital of Guyana is Georgetown. Lying on the Demerara River, the mouth of the Demerara River. And similarly to Suriname, most of the country to the south is relatively undeveloped and rainforest. So those are certainly the least known and most sparsely populated countries of South America. To the west, we have the country of Venezuela, which also in the south has rainforest. And in the north, we have the Andes Mountains. And at the very end of the Andes Mountains, we find Caracas, the capital city of Venezuela. Even though it's extremely close to the coastline, it sits at an elevation which keeps it relatively cool. To the west, we have another mountain capital of the country of Colombia and Bogota. And Bogota is quite cool, lying at a much higher elevation than Caracas. Bogota, Colombia. The Andes are cutting through the western side of Colombia here. And into the east, we have, once again, the Amazon rainforest. Note that Colombia used to own Panama, but does no longer for the last 100 years or so. To the south, we have the smaller country of Ecuador, and once again, we have a capital city quite high in the mountains here, near the equator, and that is Quito. Quito, the capital of Ecuador. And we have some beautiful mountains around, volcanic mountains around Quito, and thick jungle, both to the east and to the west, in the warmer areas. To the south of Quito, we have the large country of Peru, and the climate changes fairly dramatically as the majority of the western sides of Peru are quite dry to extremely dry in the south. And along the coast, we have the large city of Lima, Peru, which is quite different because it's much warmer than Quito and Bogota and even Caracas. But also it's much drier than those cities. And Lima, Peru. Going south and crossing over Lake Titicaca, we cross the border into the landlocked country of Bolivia. And Bolivia is somewhat unique because it has two capital cities. but the main city being La Paz, the peace. And La Paz is the highest capital city in the world. And this area, El Alto, is even higher up. So it is very chilly at times. And being near the equator, the climate is relatively stable throughout the year, but is almost never hot in La Paz. It really never is, especially at the higher elevations of the city. La Paz, Bolivia. But some of the administrative activities in Bolivia take place in Sucre, here further to the south. So Bolivia has two capital cities. And we can see the massive, or very long Atacama Desert, with right up lakes. In some of these areas, it didn't rain for 300 or 400 years, I believe. And the Tropic of Capricorn cuts right through Antofagasta, Chile, by the way. Pretty much right just to the north of it, I believe. And speaking of Chile, Chile's capital, we get further south, we start to get a little bit rainier climate, more of a Mediterranean climate, not desert. And that capital is Santiago, Santiago, Chile. And just to the east, we have the northeast, we have Aconcagua, the highest mountain in South America, here in the Andes. So we have a transition zone here from the west. It's very dry in the northern parts of Chile, and then it switches to where it's very wet on the coast and dry to the east of the mountains here. So Santiago is sort of in the transition zone where it sort of switches. And Santiago and Chile are some of the wealthiest areas of Latin America. Almost due east across the Andes on the Rio de la Plata is the capital of Argentina, and that is, of course, Buenos Aires, good air. And this is a huge city and a well laid out city in some of the areas at least. I believe they have one of the widest roads in the world in a just for a regular street, and a lot of beautiful buildings and history there in Buenos Aires. And on the other side, we have Uruguay. And Uruguay's capital is Montevideo. Montevideo is also similarly has well laid out grid system here, streets. And relatively speaking, Uruguay and Argentina and Chile are pretty wealthy compared to some of the other countries. Moving back to the north, and we end with, oh no, we don't end. We have Paraguay. And Paraguay is also landlocked. It's a fairly agrarian nation, and its capital here on the Paraguay River is Asuncion. Asuncion, the capital of Paraguay. Finally, we end with the country that makes up virtually half of the land and population of South America. And all the countries that I've mentioned, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay, they all speak Spanish as their main language. But the other, basically half of South America, speaks Portuguese. And back in the 1950s, the capital was moved to develop the interior of the country and the capital became Brasilia. And here is Brasilia, and you can see the interesting laid out uh, design of the city here, the main part of the city. This big arcing street here, and that is the capital, and it's a master planned city. Brasilia, Brazil. And here is some of there's the cathedral and a museum. And over here we have the National Congress. So very famous city, and you can see the boundary here where it is just the capital city. Similar to Washington, D.C., we have a distinct boundary, or Mexico City. They have a distinct boundary for Brasilia. So, capital of Brazil is no longer Rio, and it's not Sao Paulo, the largest city in South America. It is Brasilia. So I thank you for watching this tour of the states, or the countries and capitals of South America. Until next time.